Hi everybody. First of all, my name is Daniel Park, and I just want to thank you guys for joining us here at the Cleveland Playhouse for our production of Clybourne Park. We really hope you'll enjoy it. So I'm part of the engagement team here, and sort of as part of this pre-show discussion, we basically just want to give you guys a little bit of background information on the play that will hopefully sort of help open more possible doors of opportunity for you to sort of learn about the play and understand it and really get access to what it's talking about. So first, I just want to get a sense of what neighborhoods we have represented in the room from around Cleveland. So is there anyone here from the Slavic Village, if you just want to raise your hand? And how about Ohio City? Shaker Square? And Tremont? Anyone from University Circle? And the Warehouse District? And how about Coventry? Okay, great. So it seems like we have a sort of a really great sort of mix of neighborhoods in the room, which is, I think, a really important thing with Clybourne Park because it's all sort of about the personal history and the social history of neighborhoods and how much we own that and what they mean to us and how those things come into conflict with our own sort of personal politics. So just a cool thing to keep in mind that we are surrounded by people from all over Cleveland here. So a little bit of information on the playwright Bruce Norris. I wanted to start off with this quote of his, which is, "My primary exposure to anyone African American up until I was 14 was our maid. There's no way to escape the fact that I'm a racist." He adds, "I'd like to imagine I was an android who had only pure thoughts, but I'm a human and I'm an animal." And I think that's true for everyone. And I think it's a little bit of a jarring quote, and Norris is known to be a little bit jarring, but I think that the reason that he says this is to really let us invite the totality of our human selves into the room. That we come here with our own biases and prejudices, and some are good and some are negative, or what have you. But that we need to be aware of these things, and the fact that not all of them are faults necessarily, but they're just things that we're raised to learn, whether consciously or subconsciously, but that to move forward and have these conversations, we really need to be aware of our own and open to others. So sort of be careful of judgment and that kind of thing. So Norris is a white American. He was born on May 16th in 1990 in Texas. He went to Northwestern University in Chicago, so he's a smart guy, where he studied theater. And after he graduated, he actually had a very successful acting career on Broadway, film, television in Chicago, all over really. But that's what sort of led to his playwriting. He's produced a bunch of directed a bunch of written a bunch of plays, mostly after the 2000s. And he has a special connection with the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. Not only have they commissioned him for multiple plays, but they've also been sort of the world premiere house for the majority of his works. The plots in his work, sort of the through line, are that they always tend to involve person-to-person conflict as opposed to sort of hero versus his environment or that kind of thing. Which is interesting considering the fact that all of his plays, he says, sort of start from this socio-political question that he's dealing with. With Clybourne Park, that question for him came up in a conversation with his friend, and the idea was, how do we negotiate our political and moral beliefs with social niceties and politically correct ideology? Basically, how can we be kind to everyone and fully believe what we believe at the same time? So the play itself has a really strong connection to the play A Raisin in the Sun. Would anybody really be willing to summarize A Raisin in the Sun for us? All right, great, well I can do that. A Raisin in the Sun is a play by Lorraine Hansberry that basically focuses on a black family in Chicago who come into sort of a large sum of money because of a life insurance check that they're getting. And the main conflict is, okay, what is this money going to be used for? And in the end, it's used as a down payment on a house in the all-white Clybourne Park neighborhood, which you can sort of already see. Here we have our connection. The play, Raisin in the Sun, is inspired by the poem A Dream Deferred, which most people know by Langston Hughes, but it was actually also inspired by the Hansberry versus Lee court case of 1940, which Lorraine Hansberry's family was actually part of. Basically, the main issue with the court case was that there was a neighborhood where the majority of people did not want to integrate the neighborhood, but there was a large minority who did, and it was decided that that large majority could not control the minority in this case because they have the right to sell their house to whomever they want, no matter who that person is. and thus, in this case, it was the Hansberry family. And so they were the first black family in this all-white neighborhood. Clybourne Park is actually not a real neighborhood. It was in fact the Washington Park neighborhood. Clybourne Park is actually just a small park in Chicago that Norris used to go to every now and again to sort of chill out. Within Cleveland as well, we actually think that the play is sort of very relevant. Because if you look sort of at Cleveland in the past couple decades, there has been, obviously, as there have been in many cities, this tendency towards white flight, which is basically just a lot of white families moving out of the inner city and into the suburbs for a variety of reasons. Better education, or to raise a family, be farther away from work or closer, and that kind of thing. But Cleveland has also gone through what's been called the family flight, which is the exact same thing, but based around families of any race, which I sort of find really interesting. But what it created was a donut hole, in that the majority of the life of Cleveland was in the suburbs as opposed to sort of in the middle of the city. But we're seeing that change recently, which is sort of a sign that gentrification is in fact something that is happening in Cleveland. It does exist, and really the question for us is, how does that change, what does it mean for us, and how do we stay aware of it and the effects that it has on us as both people and as a society in Cleveland. Plays that we also think are sort of in conversation with Clybourne Park as well are Neighbors by Brandon Jacob Jenkins. That Neighbors really also looks at these ideas of racism and classism, sort of how they tie into gentrification. As well as the play, we are proud to present a presentation about the Herero of Namibia, formerly known as Southwest Africa, from the German Südwestafrika between the years 1884 and 1950 by Jackie Sibley's jury, which looks at the idea of shared histories and who has the right to tell what stories and who decides what history is and whose story it is and that kind of thing. So they're both very contemporary plays that really have a strong dialogue with Clybourne Park. So just a couple questions to consider before we start are how have the neighborhoods in and around Cleveland changed in the past 50 years? And then if you know, in the past 100 years, like what are the neighborhoods' histories really? Also, how do we stay open and aware of our own and other people's personal biases when discussing the issues of gentrification and classism? As well as, and here's this quote that I love from the playwright, the test would be if theater didn't just change what we thought, but what we do. It doesn't. I still do what I did when I was 9. It would take a traumatic disruption to change what I do. I live parasitically off the labor of others and benefit from the power structure that protects me. I'm lazy, selfish, and infantile, and so are most people. And I think that really what the playwright here, in his very brash way, is kind of challenging us as audience members to not just talk about this play, but to do something about it. That if we really care, if it's something that's important to us, to go out there and do something outside of just raising awareness. So thank you guys so much. Again, my name is Daniel Park. Feel free to ask me any questions during intermission or after the show. I encourage conversations between you guys as well, and I hope you enjoy Clybourne Park. Thank you so much for coming. So for my pre-show dramaturgical installation, I would really like to do a curated and Cleveland neighborhood history. I think it would be sort of an ideal as a video collage, but it could also work as sort of written pictures and postcards. But the ideal is that we would collect people's names, what neighborhood they live in, and how long they've lived there. And that we'd ask them to just share a 2-minute personal story of theirs related to their neighborhood or their understanding of their neighborhood's history. I think this sort of connects people to one of the major things that makes gentrification complicated, which is that cultural history goes back a lot farther than personal history does. And I also think that it does this great thing, which is it starts to connect communities and help blast away biases that people might have. And it makes everything very personal, which is, I think, really, really important in this kind of work, that we really connect faces with the stories that we're hearing. On top of that, I think it would be kind of cool. Harvard has this Project Implicit, and they have a social attitudes test that is able to measure your, in a quantitative way, your sort of unconscious social biases, and they've got one specifically that's about race, and I actually think that that would be a really interesting test to sort of have available for people to take before and after the show. there's also this really great article, sort of for the board that I'm thinking, from the Washington Post, which has had, the Washington City paper, because DC has gone through a lot of sort of issues of gentrification in the last couple of years. That it's basically a handbook for the responsible gentrifier, and it's a very controversial article, but there's a lot of really interesting information in there that really makes people think about what it is they're doing when they're moving into a neighborhood and, I mean, basically becoming part of this sort of gentrifying class, and it makes people sort of ask questions for themselves. And I think that's a really helpful thing for sort of the younger people that come to see Clybourne Park. The last idea that I have for it is that, you can find all these links I posted below, but I found this really great map of Cleveland that sort of word art about, that sort of has all of the Cleveland neighborhoods. And I think I would really like to take inspiration from that for the layout and sort of design of this installation. I think it's fun, and it kind of gives us a sense of each of the neighborhoods in kind of a cool way. So yeah, those are my ideas. Thank you.